So the Supreme Court's recent 6-3 decision, which caused issues between the state of Texas and the Biden administration over the border, is now getting even more complicated because of what is going on at the lower court level. So let's talk about what is now happening. Now, really quick, before we jump into this video, I want to thank one of the main supporters of this channel, which is 1st Phorm. 1st Phorm is an amazing company. Not only do they help people get healthier and provide supplements that are absolutely amazing, but they are all huge freedom lovers, pro 2A. In fact, I was just at an event out in Iowa, and 1st Phorm was out there supporting a firearms event, which is very much unheard of, where you have a mainstream company, especially like 1st Phorm, supporting the Second Amendment. So again, amazing company. Not only do they have amazing supplements that will help you during your health journey, but they are pro-freedom. So if you're interested, you can check them out using the links down below. And thank you again to 1st Phorm for sponsoring and supporting me in this content. Now, like I mentioned in the intro, in this video, we need to talk about how a new decision and involvement by the Supreme Court has caused some issues between the state of Texas and the Biden administration over the border, and how things are getting even more complicated at the lower court level now that the 5th Circuit is reviewing this issue. The state of Texas is currently using the decision by the Supreme Court to support their right to self-defense. And a couple of weeks ago, you had the Supreme Court issue a decision, a 6-3 decision in a case called Labrador versus Poe. That decision placed limitations on lower courts granting overbroad universal relief in cases like this one. That decision is now being used by the state of Texas in the U.S. versus the state of Texas lawsuit. And the state of Texas aim is to strike down the universal block that a lower court put in place on the state of Texas and their new SB4 law. The Biden administration and multiple consolidated plaintiffs are fighting desperately to avoid that Supreme Court precedent and decision being applied by the 5th Circuit in this specific case. And we're getting even more precedent issued by some of these plaintiffs, by organizations like the ACLU, trying to prevent the 5th Circuit from overriding what happened and essentially prevent Texas from being able to enforce and put in place SB4. Now, we need to do some background on this case so you understand what the Supreme Court's order was, what happened, and now what the 5th Circuit is reviewing. Texas SB4 effectively makes it a crime for an individual to violate federal law by crossing into the state of Texas at any location other than a lawful point of entry, essentially coming into the nation illegally. It also makes it a further crime to illegally re-enter after you have been already removed by the administration. And then also it gives some power to state judges in Texas to issue special orders requiring those individuals who are found to then have to re-enter or go back to the nation where they crossed, essentially go back to whatever country they had came from. This bill was challenged by the Biden administration, and it caused a huge can of worms that is currently still going on. A district court on review of this case issued a preliminary injunction, which then prevented Texas from enforcing all of SB4. So that was a universal preliminary injunction that was put in place against Texas and SB4. That's going to be very critical to understand how the Supreme Court's new Labrador case is impacting this case. Texas then appealed that preliminary injunction up to the 5th Circuit, and in response, the 5th Circuit issued an administrative stay on that lower court universal order. That means that originally, through an administrative stay, the 5th Circuit sided with the state of Texas and put a halt on that block. So essentially, Texas could still enforce SB4 at that moment. Then various cases were consolidated, and then the plaintiffs did not like what the 5th Circuit did with that administrative stay, so they filed for Supreme Court emergency intervention. They asked for the Supreme Court to step in early and remove that 5th Circuit administrative stay. What they wanted was a block on SB4, and what ended up happening is the Supreme Court did not side with the Biden administration. That means that the Supreme Court decided in favor of leaving the temporary block in place and essentially allowing SB4 to remain in effect. Now, interestingly, in response to that Supreme Court 6-3 order, that very same day, a new 3-judge panel in the 5th Circuit who had control of this case decided to, on their own, remove their own administrative stay. Then just a few days after that, the 5th Circuit held their own oral arguments and their own hearing on whether or not they would grant a preliminary injunction against SB4. From the arguments, it sounded like the 5th Circuit would still rule 2-1 in favor of the Biden administration, but during those arguments, there were some concerns about if the U.S. government can even seek this type of universal equitable relief against the state of Texas, whether or not a broad-reaching preliminary injunction against all of SB4 would go too far. There also was a lot of dispute during the hearings, especially from dissenting Judge Oldham, who agreed with the state of Texas that the federal government here cannot file this type of lawsuit And for the Fifth Circuit to allow this action would be unprecedented. Well, then just a couple weeks after that hearing in the Fifth Circuit, the Supreme Court issued a new decision, a new 6-3 decision, which was a little bit unprecedented, and that was the Labrador case. And in the Labrador case, they outlined what type of broad-reaching preliminary injunctions would be permissible and which ones would not. In that case, the Supreme Court stated that lower courts should not issue universal preliminary injunctions which go beyond the scope of relief, which would essentially only cure the injury that is being claimed by the plaintiffs. The Supreme Court said that lower courts should move back to the principle of granting more limited relief instead of universal injunctions. In fact, Justice Gorsuch, during his concurrence, stated that ordinarily injunctions like these may go no further than necessary to provide interim relief to the parties. In this case, however, the district court went much further, prohibiting a state from enforcing any aspect of its duly enacted law against anyone. Today, this court stays the district court's injunction to the extent it applies to non-parties, which is to say, to the extent it provides universal relief. That is a welcome development. So the Labrador case kind of corrected some of the issues where lower courts would issue broad universal preliminary injunctions against an entire state law. And if that rings a bell, that is because that's exactly what the lower court did in favor of the Biden administration when it came to Texas SB 4. They put a universal injunction against the entire SB 4. And so Texas went and used the Labrador case as support for why that lower court decision needs to be struck down and why they should be able to implement some aspects of SB 4. Now, of course, the federal government here is fighting back against the Labrador case and it being used in this specific case. In the response, the federal government argues that as long as the named plaintiffs are the United States, since the United States itself is one of the named plaintiffs, they are exempt from some of that language. They get special treatment. They argue that they get special treatment and therefore they can themselves get a universal block against laws like SB 4. Now, in response to this, what has now happened is there's been various plaintiffs who have filed supplemental briefs arguing why this Labrador case and why some of the precedent used in this case should not be followed by the Fifth Circuit. The ACLU recently filed a new supplemental letter to the court here arguing that the Labrador case should not be used, that some new precedent out of Oklahoma, in fact, would also direct the court to allow SB 4 to be completely blocked, that the federal government should be treated different. So this is one of those interesting battles where you have a lot of new precedent being used in this case, a lot of varying precedent and a lot of varying issues that are being debated in this lawsuit. And right now, the Fifth Circuit, in my eyes, would probably still side with the federal government. That is the kind of the sound. If you listen to the oral arguments at all, it sounds like that's how they are leaning. You have Judge Oldham, who was saying a lot of the precedent that they're using is incorrect. He was kind of vindicated a little bit by the Labrador case, but there are some other issues that are still being disputed in this case. And regardless of what happens and how this three-judge panel in the Fifth Circuit rules, I think this is one of those cases and one of those issues that will be appealed up to the en banc panel in the Fifth Circuit, or maybe even they will jump that line and go directly back to the Supreme Court for new language and a new decision on whether or not what the Fifth Circuit is doing is proper or not. Again, the Supreme Court already got involved once on an emergency basis in this case when it came to the administrative stay, and they sided with the state of Texas. It seems like when it comes to this border issue, the Supreme Court has been siding with the states themselves instead of the federal government, but we'll have to see how this plays out, especially with some of the new precedent that is being submitted in this case. So as things change and as things develop, I will let you guys know. Also, if you guys have any questions, go ahead and comment down below and I will try to answer to the best of my ability. Also, if you like this video and you'd like to support the channel, one of the best ways to do that is to like, comment, and subscribe. All those things help to fuel the algorithm and it signals to YouTube that you guys see value in these videos and in this type of two-way news. But as always, thank you all for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And never forget, this nation was built by armed scholars, and this nation will be maintained by armed scholars.